Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy, the Columbia River Knife and Tool, or Cricket, as I'm going to keep calling him, Jettison by Robert Carter. So, Robert Carter is actually pretty hot in the knife world right now, in that he's got this guy, which a lot of people are liking, and he's got this guy too, the Ontario Carter Prime, which is also a very interesting knife, and you'll be... well, there's a review coming up of this guy as well. But anyways, this is a fascinating knife, and I'd like to thank my buddy Francisco for sending this along. One other note about Robert Carter, this is Mel Pardue's grandkid. So, yeah, kind of cool. Anyways, size comparison, here is your Spyderco Delica. Next to it, this is a Spyderco PM2. So this is not a very large knife, particularly. I mean, you can see you're only getting a little bit more blade than your Spyderco Delica. This is your Ontario Rat number 1 here. And let's grab your Rat number 2. So bigger than the 2, smaller than the 1. And what else? Yeah, I don't know. J. Kovac, Quebec. Why not, right? It's on the table already, might as well do the comparison. So, yeah, that's the Jettison, and this guy is going for about $50. So that's something you got to keep in mind throughout the review here. Let's go ahead and jump into the good, the bad, and the ugly of your Cricket Jettison. So first off, I got to give this points for a unique design. I cannot think of another knife that looks like this. Ranging from the little harpoon going on up on this, to the blade shape, to just the overall shape of the handle. This is not a knife that looks anything like other knives. There are a lot of derivative of just like, oh yeah, that's certainly a pocket knife designs. This one is fairly unique in the grand scheme of it. And so I appreciate that. That's nice. A good unique design is something that's hard to find, and especially on the lower end. So, gotta give credit there. I'm also a big fan of Wharncliffe style blades, although this is much more sheep's footy in that it does have some belly to it. And, you know, the grind on this guy, I'm not entirely sure whether this is supposed to be a recurve or whether it's just poorly ground, but either way, it is doing a recurve, it is doing a Wharncliffe sort of affair, and I do like a Wharncliffe sort of blade. So that's a nice thing. I appreciate that very much. I will say that the knife has a very smooth closing action. It's on Teflon washers, which, oh, I'm sure I can get you to see somehow or another. Here we go. Down inside there, Teflon washers. And the smoothness of the action is just entirely due to the fact that the blade is very, very heavy. This is not a lightweight blade, and so anything with a blade this heavy is going to close fairly smoothly, but it is nice. It is a nice little action going on there in that way. So I appreciate very much the smooth closure there. The printing on the blade is actually done well. I very often will critique that, but you can see here that the details are nicely done, even the cutout on the K. And on this side here, Jettison Carter design is again printed nicely, and the font is consistent throughout this. It's not doing the Cold Steel 18 font sort of affair. So I'm a big fan of that. It's, you know, that's nicely done. And then one other thing to point out that was actually a little impressive to me when I did the disassembly here, hopefully I can show this to you, is that inside of this knife here is actually a fair amount of internal milling. They've taken portions of the stainless steel handle out of here in order to reduce the weight a little bit. So, yeah, there's your good. It's got a nice Wharncliffe-y, sheep's footy sort of blade going on. It's got a unique design to it, which I appreciate very much. It's got a very smooth close because of this heavy blade on fairly loose-fitting Teflon washers. The printing is well done, and there is some good interior milling. So I appreciate all of those things. Let's go on ahead and jump into the bad. Okay, so on the bad side, first off, the knife is a little bit hard to unlock because there's no cutout on the frame for it. On a lot of frame locks, there is a little hole, basically, for your thumb to go through, and this is maybe a little more extreme than most, but for your thumb to go through and hit the lock bar. On this guy, there's a little milling here, but by and large, you just shove your thumb in there and hope for the best. You can unlock it, certainly, but I feel like they could have done a little better with that. The clip is also not too compelling, because you've got these two screws here that really go into the path of the clip. So if you're wearing thick pants, your pants will stop right about here, because they're interfering with the screws there. Speaking of thicker pants, if you got thick pants, this is going to be a problem. The clip ramps up very, very, well, a very little amount. And so, again, just the clip is leaving me cold. It'll be hard to deal with thicker fabrics. The steel on this guy is okay. It's the R13 MOV. It's either barely adequate or barely inadequate. But either way, it's nothing to write home about. One thing that is worth writing home about, if you've got an interesting home to get your letters, I guess, is that this is not a very grippy knife at all. This is polished stainless steel. And in fact, the only thing that's really grippable on this knife is the clip itself. So if this is at all wet, if it's oily, if anything like that, this knife is not going to stay in your hand whatsoever. And that's disappointing. So if you work in the Vaseline factory, this is not your choice whatsoever. The blade on this guy is honestly way too thick. This knife is got a saber grind, which means it's not going to be the world's best slicer anyways, but the blade on this is just absurd. It's thicker than your Spyderco PM2, which already has an overly thick blade. And it's about the same thickness, maybe even a little thicker than your Carter Prime by Ontario Knife, which is another really thick blade. So, really, I don't know. I know that they need the blade weight for the action to be salvageable on this guy, but that doesn't do it for me. Speaking of excessive blade material, this harpoon here doesn't do it for me. I would much prefer if the knife had that kind of trimmed off, because not so much I mind the harpoon aesthetically, but because it makes the knife a lot wider in the pocket. You've suddenly got this extra chunk here that you have to accommodate in the pocket, versus if it were just like this would be a really great knife to carry. Given, it would make the knife a little bit less aesthetically unique, but this is one of those cases in which unique kind of costs some things. I'm not a big fan there. The knife is actually fairly heavy because, unlike in the small one, they've chosen to cut a corner and make this guy entirely out of steel, rather than the titanium. And so this is a 4.5 ounce knife, which makes it way heavier than, for instance, your Spyderco Delica, which at 2.2. And, you know, it's surprisingly heavy. And I really do wish they'd gone titanium here. Even with the little internal milling, I don't know. This would have been much better as a $70 knife in titanium. But I'm not a huge fan of weight in the knife. And finally, the fit and finish ain't great. There is blade play. Even after tuning it, in order for the action to fall shut nicely, or even to be decent, you need to build a little tiny bit of blade play back and forth into there. Otherwise, it's really super stiff. So I'm not a big fan of that. That's often the case with Teflon, but not so thrilled. The backspacer here, there are definite gaps where the backspacer sticks up a little bit more or is down a little bit below. Fit and finish ain't great. The grind on this guy is really bad, unfortunately. I mean, you can see that they've kind of ground a little bit of recurve into the blade here. The grind is asymmetrical in that this side is a little shallower than this side, except up here where this side is shallower than this side. And there's this little gem right here where they clearly fell off the belt and then decided to give it another shot. Whoever's grinding this guy was not really doing so hot. So that's no good. And it's also not flat, like a Wharncliffe. If they actually intended for this to be a Wharncliffe blade rather than something sheep's footy, oh man, that's bad. I'm giving them credit and hoping that they meant to put a belly into this blade, because if they didn't, then oh boy, no good whatsoever there. And then finally, this is a little thing, but it bugs me a little bit. The stop pin here is exposed on both sides. That's fine, but it's asymmetrical. This side is a lot less shallow, is a lot more shallow than this side. That's just a little fit and finish thing, but that just means they're using the wrong damn parts. So, not a big fan of that. And then finally, the ergonomics on this knife are not great for my hands. Yeah, it works, but there's just not enough to grip down here, and there's a little too much to grip up here. It's okay, but I don't know. I'm just not a big fan of the ergos here. This little bump here is the ergonomic saving grace. It's one of the few things that is trying to keep this in the hand, but I just don't love it. And this finger choil isn't quite big enough for a finger. I don't know. I don't get it. So, not a big fan. Anyways, so there's your bad. It's hard to unlock. The steel is iffy on it. The clip is iffy on it. The blade is overly thick and overly harpoony. It's stainless. It's stainless scales, so it's pretty damn heavy. The fit and finish ain't great, and the ergonomics just really aren't what you would hope for in life. So let's jump into the ugly. Okay, two ugly things. First off, the blade is way over-polished. Actually, frankly, the whole knife is. But it feels like somebody went at this with a big cloth buffing wheel and a bunch of buffing compound for hours and hours and hours. And so you can see that every straight line is kind of rounded off. Every area is a little bit melted. The entire knife almost has a bit of a melted feel to it. You can see, for instance, that this corner is much more rounded off than the other corner, implying that they hit the other side there a lot more. And even to the extent that the harpoon is slightly asymmetrical, in that it goes a little bit further in this direction than in this direction, somebody really went at this way too long with a polishing wheel. It's not the end of the world, but it is ugly, and it is a little bit of a quality control foul. There was somebody there who wasn't properly trained, and just overbuffed the crap out of this. So it's a little on the ugly side. Uglier than that, though, is the action. The action is just not very good. The detent is very soft. And it has a square detent hole. And that's not necessarily ugly in and of itself, but I've never seen it before. And the end result is not great. It's a very weak detent. And that means that unless you're running it like I've got it now, with a little bit of blade play, you're going to have trouble flipping this guy out. I mean, if you use wrist, you're always going to be okay, but by and large, this has got a very, very weak detent, and I'm not a big fan. And especially with this big, heavy blade, it can sometimes be hard to statically flip, especially, you know, in your positions. It's doing it now. But either way, that's because I'm running it pretty loose and pretty lubed. I'm just not a big fan of the detent on this guy. There's just not a whole lot of detent to it. So, there we go. That's kind of the ugly of it, is the blade was way over polished, and the detent is very weak, leading to a flipping action that just isn't so stellar. So, what are the final conclusions here? Honestly, this is a really interesting design that I think was done pretty poorly. It has the feeling of a knife where Robert Carter sent him a pretty interesting design with a lot of good to it, but then some marketer decided, okay, great, now we have to make it for $20 worth of materials and time. And everybody said, wait, what, 20 bucks? Really? And then they cut every corner possible to kind of get there. They went with steel instead of titanium, which makes the knife overly heavy. They went with the Teflon washers, which means that in order for the action to be remotely worth a damn, it needed a really heavy blade. And so you end up with a blade that's really thick. They put in a really crappy detent for some reason, and they finished it, honestly, pretty poorly. And so the whole thing, you get the impression that the people making it don't really give a damn about quality, they just needed to hit a price point. And that's unfortunate, and that's kind of Cricket's Achilles heel, in my opinion. They seem to have this belief at a corporate level that if you lower the price point, it always increases value. But I think this is a pretty good argument against that. This is a $50 knife that's iffy at 50 bucks. I mean, it's okay, I guess. But had they done it right and charged 70 bucks, it would have been great value. Had they put some titanium on here, perhaps, like they did on the smaller one. Or had they used a better fit and finish, better materials, had they frankly given a damn? Had they given it to a factory worker who gave a crap and who probably wasn't underpaid and on hour 13 of a shift? I feel like they could have done it a little bit better than this. And so, you know, it's a $50 knife that probably should have been 70 bucks, but as a result, because they cheaped out, is getting handily beaten by knives. This is the Ontario Rat number 1, which is a much better knife in pretty much every way. And it's even less expensive. This guy's like 35 bucks. And for 10 bucks more, you can get into a Spyderco Delica, which is one of the very best EDC options in the world, and is very well made for what it is. I just don't get it. And so, you know, it can get absolutely wrecked by knives that are inexpensive and less expense, but made less cheaply than this guy. So there you go. And unfortunately, then, this kind of makes it another entry in Cricket's long line of, honestly, kind of half-assing really great ideas. Cricket has had a lot of knives that I've thought, wow, that's great, that's compelling, I want to check that out. And then I check it out, and I'm like, oh, that was a poor choice. Oh, that's cheap. Oh, no, don't cut that corner. Oh, you cut the corner. And it's sad to watch. And so this is just another one of those. And so I like the idea of this a lot, but I kind of wish another knife maker, another company would have gotten this instead. Because as it is, unfortunately, I don't know, it's not terribly compelling. So, like I said, it's unfortunately kind of a half-ass attempt at a really interesting idea. I don't think I recommend this knife particularly. I think you can pretty safely jettison this from your shopping cart, because that 50 bucks can be better spent elsewhere in terms of functional tools. But Robert Carter is really impressing me. This is the second knife in a very short amount of time from this guy that's come across my table, and I'm really pretty damned impressed by it. And so I think he's going to be he's going to be a fixture. I'm not impressed with the knife, but I am impressed with the design. So keep an eye on him. I think his designs are going to be getting more and more interesting, and he's going to be a rising star. But hopefully, past the point, he'll start working with manufacturers who give a little bit more of a damn than Cricket does. Anyways, hope this has been interesting, and have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day.